you doing?
Cannot complain. Yeah, solid. Really pumped for this one, and obviously shout out attention. We're big fans of them as well over here. So it was a nice transition.
Cool. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Patrick Spychalski. I help out with partnerships at Clay. I've been there for quite a while. Had a bunch of different hats at the company. Ran their YouTube and LinkedIn for a while. Now helping more with enterprise partnerships. I also run a Clay implementation agency called The Kiln, where we help other companies implement the tool. It is, as you'll probably see in this demo, a bit of a doozy to use sometimes. And so we, of course, just try to assist companies in doing so effectively. And of course, just with some creative ideas as well.
Our community was waiting for this session, so can't wait to get into the demo.
Yeah,
Personalization at scale. Let's
yeah,
prove that it's like you don't have to be a developer or a PhD to do it with Clay.
yeah. I totally agree. I mean, some people might argue otherwise. I see a lot of complaints on LinkedIn sometimes about how difficult Clay is to use, but I think if you break it down, it's definitely not as tricky as people shape it out to be. And even if it is tricky, it's by design ultimately. Like it's a really powerful tool and it has a lot of possibilities. And obviously, in order to have that many possibilities and that much variability, you have to have some level of difficulty to use it. So, I think if Clay made it any easier to use, it would be a lot less powerful and probably, a tool not many people would be using at the time. So, yeah. All right, well, awesome. I'm totally down to get going into this if you are. All
Do
right,
it.
sweet. So for those who don't know what Clay is or haven't used the tool before, it has a wide variety of use cases. The one I'm planning on focusing on specifically for this is outbound, because I think it has incredible outbound functionality. So prior to Clay, you pretty much had two options with regards to outbound. The first one would be hire like legions of SDRs and BDRs and AEs to kind of manage your sales function, and they'd have to manually research each prospect, find them, put them into a list using like a Zoom Info or an Apollo, research all the different data points that you cared about manually, and then manually write a message to them. Of course, like keep up with sequences over and over again. And it was just a super tedious process. So that was your first option. And the second option, of course, is just sending really templatized, high scale volumes of emails. The problem with that, of course, is that they're generally not super relevant. The reply rates really weren't there. And so, in essence, Clay was created to bridge that gap. And so you can now use the tool to create these really highly personalized, highly relevant messages and send them at scale. So you can send, I mean, in theory, like thousands of them a day, and they're all pretty hyper personalized, as you'll be able to see in just a second. So the demo that I wanted to show you was actually for one of our earlier clients who was a plant store. But they were more than just a plant store. They were like a corporate plant store. So like they were supplying to like Google and Apple all the plants for their offices, all of the gifts for their employees that would be plants. And this company would provide all of that for them. So they were not just like, like a mom and pop plant store. They were shipping out thousands and thousands of these plants to people. And they approached us saying, hey, we want to do a big push on outbound here. We want to show these companies that we're the obvious choice for providing plans to them. And so we decided to write some cool personalized copy that I thought really demos Clay well. And yeah, we'll hop into it now. So let me find my Chrome. You can see my screen, right, Julia? Perfect. So you can see here that I have a set of copy, and I wanted to walk through that first because it's kind of the basis for how we use Clay. And so you can see here that I have a little personalization section, which I'll get to in just a second, but I wanted to quickly walk through the copy and how it works. So you can see I have 4 emails in the sequence here, and in these brackets, I have quite a few personalizations. So I have this first line, that's a personalization. And if you go to the personalization section here, you can see this is a trigger-based personalization line. So if the company's hiring, we have a line for that. If they've raised funds, we have a line for that. If they have headcount growth, we have a line for that. Then it transitions into a quick value prop, just saying, hey, we provide employee plant gifts, that they elevate the vibe of a workspace, et cetera. And then this third line is pretty much just saying, hey, because your company is focused on X mission, maybe you could gift employees a plant. And this is like a plant that in a really vague, interesting way ties into their value prop. And so obviously it's kind of like it's a funky line, but we figured we would just be like, hey, since Apple provides like super aesthetically pleasing products, then you can provide this plant because it's like known for its beauty or something, right? And so the idea was just to have like something that would capture their attention. And then we of course offer them a plan consultation. And I won't go into all of these different emails. I think you kind of understand the point, which is we have all these personalizations and we have to in some way figure out a way to send all of these messages at scale programmatically instead of having SDRs send this thing over and over and over again and take like, months to do it. So I have a clay table right here. Again, for those who have not been into the tool before, the idea with clay is it's this huge spreadsheet and it has a bunch of integrations. And those integrations could be a variety of things. They could be data providers that help you find more information on prospects. They can be AI agents that can go find a bunch of information on companies by scraping the web. And you can also use ChatGPT at scale to like pretty much provide you a word output that we can then use for personalization. And so there's a ton of functionality, but the idea is like if you've used something like Zapier before, it kind of works in that way in which you were able to sequence different automations and different data providers to find things, and then of course sequence that into a high scale campaign. And so you can see we have all of our prospects in this list here. And the idea is we have to go fulfill all of these personalizations that we found in this earlier copy in some way. And the way you have to think about it is all of these personalizations require data about the company. So like, for example, this personalization line, we need to figure out, is the company hiring? Have they raised funds? Have they had headcount growth, right? So that's something we have to find out in Clay. And then based on that outcome, create a personalization in the tool. And so going back to here, we do quite a few things in Clay with these prospects, and I'll kind of walk through a few of them briefly. So the first thing is that we wanted to figure out the company's description. That was quite easy to do. We have this tool called Clayagent within the tool that allows you to prompt an agent to go find information on the company that you're reaching out to. So you can reference a column, for example, the company URL. You can see it references the column for each row. And you can say, visit the website of this company, give me a website of what the company is good at doing or trying to achieve. We give it some examples of what it should output. And you can see here, it output this right here. And that was able to fulfill us the mission segment of our copy. So going back to this, we now have, because company name is focused on this mission part has now been found in Clay, and we can then go put it into our email campaign. So now we use another integration to get the company's mission that we output right here. And we said, here's a list of plants that Horty provides to their customers. Based on the company's mission, pick one that most represents the company's mission and tell us why. So like, again, a very interesting way to do outbound. I wouldn't recommend it for most things outside of a plant store, but it worked in this case. It got us a ton of positive responses. But the point is it outputted a plant. You can see here, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that plant name because it thrives on minimal care, analogous to cost efficiency and streamlined SaaS management, which of course is related to the prospect company. And so just like you would use ChatGPT, you can use it at scale in Clay, and you can reference a full column at a time. So you can see there's 500 rows here. And once we run this, it creates a personalization for all 500 rows. There are a ton of data enrichments within the tool. One of my favorites is the enrich company integration. If you want to enrich anything in Clay, you just click add enrichment. You can type in any data point you could possibly want. So like work email will pop up. We wanted to find fundraising will pop up. You get the general idea. But one of my favorites is the enrich company integration because it gets all of the company's LinkedIn data and puts it into a Clay table for you to use. All it requires is you throw in the company LinkedIn URL, which you can source using Clay. And then when you click on a result here, you have all of the company's LinkedIn data, just like anything you could possibly need from the business, which is of course super helpful for a variety of reasons. So now that we've created a few of these personalizations in our initial table, we of course have to find people that actually work for these companies. Obviously, like you need to email somebody. You can't just like, email a company, or at least I wouldn't advise it for most cases. So what you can do is you can actually find people using Clay. So if you wanted to, you can type in find people, and you can see this find contacts at company. You can click save results in a new table. And just like if you were using something like Apollo or ZoomInfo, you have a ton of filters as to how you can find people, and it scrapes the company's LinkedIn's if you want to find people that work at the companies, and it finds people that fit certain criteria. So you could throw in like founder, CEO, president into the job title section, and it will populate those people here. So I did that, and you can see here we have a list of people who work for this company that fit our ICP. So we wanted to find people in marketing or brand that would be in charge or potentially in charge of buying plants for their customers. So HR for their employees, sorry. And so HR is another one that we try to target a fair amount. Once we find those people, which is completely free to do in Clay, you don't even really need to pay for like a paid plan to do this. You then have a ton of information on them. So you have their full name, their first name, their last name, their job title, a ton of information. We have all these personalizations that we created. And now we can find their email accounts. We can make sure all their company names are normalized and their location that they're based in is normalized. And you can add them to a campaign. So I wanted to show you an example of what this looks like. This is a tool called Smart Lead. We use this a lot to send outbound at scale. And once you set up the entire Clay table, you now have just thousands of these emails created automatically in Smart Lead. So, hey, congrats on the recent round. Figure with new team members comes an opportunity to welcome them to brand yourself, which is the company in this case, in a unique way. We provide plant gifts. Here's a value prop. Because Brand Yourself is focused on providing online reputation management services, maybe you could gift employees this plant because it thrives in various conditions, adapting much like online reputation strategies. And then the consultation. You can see we have this for, of course, all of the emails and all the personalizations. And so this table, I think, took me like an hour and a half to set up, and it can now send out 500 super personalized emails, or I guess as many as you'd like, as many people as you want to add to the table. Obviously, as you can imagine, doing this normally would take, I don't even know how long, like weeks probably, to do all the research and to come up with a plan to suggest to them and a reason why. And it's all done in an automated way. And so at my agency, we've been doing this for our clients. And in the past year, we've generated, I think, around like 80 million in pipeline for them, just using these methods. And obviously running this level of campaign scale allows for that really easily, and it takes a lot less time to do so. So yeah, anyway, that is kind of the high level on Clay. Obviously, if you have any questions, happy to answer, and hopefully I was not going too fast there.
Oh, this is fascinating. Patrick, immediate question from Hector here. How is Clay better or different than Lavender AI?
I'm sorry, what is it, the tech?
Lavender AI.
So Lavender is actually integrated with Clay. So a lot of the data enrichment stuff that Lavender does, I believe it directly integrates with Clay. So you can think of Clay as an aggregation of tools as opposed to a tool in itself. So if you actually go here and you click add enrichment, you'll see that there are a ton of companies here that enrich with Clay. I think Lavender is one of them. Maybe I'm super wrong, but let's see. Yeah, here you go. We have Lavender right there. So like Clay is an aggregation of all these tools. It's not necessarily just a tool in itself. So the idea is you cannot get better data than Clay has because it's using every data provider. And even if the data providers aren't in the integration section, you can connect the API using this API integration they have and connect it yourself. So like in theory, as long as there's a data provider with an API, Clay will be able to put that in their table and aggregate it in a clean way.
Claudia is asking, can you elaborate how the email addresses are found, please?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll go to this table really quickly. Clay has this incredible feature called an email enrichment waterfall. And so the idea behind it is if you click on enrichment and type in work email, it asks for a few pieces of data. The first thing is the person's LinkedIn profile, their full name, and their company domain. And what you're able to do is we have, in this case, 7 data providers that we're using. And the idea here is first, we're going to look for their email with this data provider. If it can't find it, then it goes to this data provider, so on and so forth. And it only spends the amount of credits it takes to find it in one of them. So you'll see here that it only, like, let's say it finds it on the first try using find email, it's only going to spend 2 credits. But let's say it goes all the way down to this one, it still only spends 2 credits. So if it finds an email, you spend credits, which essentially like Clay's like currency for finding data. And if not, then you don't have to spend anything. And the beauty behind that is you get super, super high data coverage without spending any additional money on having to find emails. So anyway, you put in that information, you click run, and you can kind of see how it operates here. It looks for the email here first. If it finds it, then it stops running any of the further integrations. And if it doesn't, it goes down the line until it finds something. So in this case, the last one, it found people's emails. And in this case, it found it kind of in the beginning. So that's kind of the idea behind it.
Another question from Hector. How can Clay help me find my next role within target companies by tapping into the hidden job market?
Yeah, so Clay actually has this really cool functionality called Find Jobs. And so I'm pretty sure if I just type it in here, you can find actually all of the possible job openings that are existing on LinkedIn for any given company or any given space. You can see you can even include keywords in job description, location, job type, recruiter, etc., and import those all into a table. And of course, there is a ton of outbound possibility there. You can find the founder of the company or at least like the decision maker for that particular job of the company, and then run an outbound campaign at scale and increase your likelihood of finding a job vastly. If you don't want to take that approach and you want to find kind of like off market or off job listing jobs, you can just like import a list of companies that you find to be interesting, and then just cold sell yourself to the person running the department that you're reaching out to. And I have a few friends just like not in the space who have looked for jobs, and I've gotten them jobs using this method within like a few hours, like of just work. So I can guarantee you it does work if done correctly. A friend 2 days ago did it, and first email she sent worked. So like it, if done correctly, can yield some great results.
Claudia, what about data privacy?
As you said, data pricing.
Privacy. Excuse me.
Privacy. All of the data that we use are aggregated by data providers that are, of course, following all of the data privacy laws that are, they're required to follow. And so any sort of data that isn't allowed to be accessed, for example, a LinkedIn private profile, you can't access. All of this data is found just through public information. Somebody registers for a software. That software says, "Hey, you're giving us permission to share your contact information." That contact information gets shared with the data provider, and then Clay accesses that data provider. And so that's kind of the general idea behind the privacy aspect.
Question from Nathan. Could you clarify the personalizing data points? Is it just funding and hiring? Can it scrape LinkedIn for recent posts or live news articles?
Yeah. So Clay, and this is maybe going to sound like a crazy statement, but as long as the information about the person or company that you're looking for is publicly available online, there is a way to find it in Clay. And so um, I would say the one of the tough parts about using Clay, and actually a lot of the reason people would bring us on as an agency sometimes, is because the possibilities are so vast that you kind of need somebody who's used the tool quite a bit to understand how much you can do with it. So like, for example, I'll just do something random here, and it'll probably take a second for Clayton to give me the results here. But let's say I wanted to find the link to the contact page of the company's website. I could just go ahead and say like, find me the contact page for company name's website. Here is their site, and then throw in the company's URL. And then I can just say output just the link, nothing else, and not spell. There we go. And then I can also even output this response to just be a URL. And when I save it and run it, it can go find that information. And it's probably take a second to load, but as I answer questions, you'll see this eventually ends up loading. The idea is the enrichment capabilities are pretty much whatever you want them to be. Like again, as long as it's able to be found somewhere, it might take some prompts tweaking. So like if you try it the first time, especially using a tool like Clayagent, the AI agent, it might not happen the first time, but keep prompting it and keep persisting, and it will probably find it to a point where it's pretty accurate.
Next question. What about Go high level integration? Is it coming?
I think they haven't launched it yet, but given that I work there, I usually have some insight as to what they're launching, and I'm pretty sure that's coming soon. So I'm pretty sure it's on the docket. It's not out yet, it seems, but stay tuned. Pretty sure it's coming.
Next one. How Clay is different or has unique features that, wait a second, that just trying to make sense of this question. So basically, what's the difference between Clay and Factors.ai?
I'm somewhat familiar with factors. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, and like actually do because I'm not completely familiar, but I'm pretty sure factors is more of like an AI SDR function. And if that's the case, Clay doesn't really do that per se. Clay is more of an automation tool that you use to find data and then action upon that data to send somewhere else. So like outbound's only really one of its use cases. There is like inbound, there's RevOps use cases. I would say Clay differentiates in the sense that it's mostly I'd say it's less AI heavy than I remember factors being. I'll have to do some research on the tool itself, but I know it's vastly different than factors. I'm just not sure exactly what factors does. Like I remember seeing it and being like, I think this is like an AI SDR function, but anyway,
Two
bad answer. But
questions for
yeah.
two questions from Claudia. What is the accuracy and is Clay affordable for small businesses?
I'll answer the accuracy question first. Depending on what data provider you use, it goes all the way from super accurate to somewhat accurate. So Claygent, this thing I used right here, you can say this is probably the least accurate way to find data that Clay has, and that's because you're using an AI agent to go find information, and of course sometimes it will hallucinate. And so, I mean, obviously it probably found the contact page pretty well. It's not a super hard task. But when you go to have it find, let's say, more difficult tasks, for example, one of our clients wanted us to find like the verbiage on the call to action button of one of their forms on their websites for all of their prospects. It gets a little bit more difficult. Sometimes it can end up outputting at like 70 to 80% accuracy, in which case, of course, you don't want to be completely relying on for an outbound campaign. For the affordability aspect, Clay has a bunch of different plans. It really depends on what you want to get done. The plans range from free to $800 a month, I believe. The pro plan, I would say, definitely don't get until you've used the tool a little bit and understand how it works, because burning credits is essentially Clay works in a credit system, and burning credits is quite easy to do when you're using it in the beginning. I think the lowest plan is, I can go check real quick, and actually we'll just figure it out. The lowest plan is 134 a month, and that gets you quite a few credits to toy around with, and most of the feature functionality that you would use, that you would need to use it in the beginning. So I'd say it's pretty affordable. I mean, I'd say the way in which to determine whether Clay is worth it for you, particularly with outbound, is to kind of do a calculation like how high ticket an item do I have? Is it worth doing outbound for? Right? Like if you're selling something that's like a $10 a month software, maybe doing outbound is not the best approach because you have to send so many emails for that to work. Getting a positive response, maybe one in every 100, one in every 200 emails. The amount of claim enrichment that's going to take is probably a negative value return. If you're selling a really high ticket item and your TAM is somewhat large, I would highly recommend using something like Clay because the return is pretty great.
I'm on a question from Brandon here. He's an existing Clay customer and sees huge potential to scale outbound as described, but there is a steep learning curve to fully wield it as a direct seller. What is the best way to get training or help getting started or creating some workflows? For example, going from a list to some persona or industry based outreach sequence template, and then using AI to personalize, as Patrick just showed. Super cool, but I'm not confident I can replicate it.
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, Clay is a pretty tough tool to use relative to a lot of the sales tools out there. Completely acknowledge that. However, I would say the learning curve is worth it once you become, of course, like, expert, or not even expert, but just even sufficient at the tool. To answer your question, in my opinion, the best way and the most accessible way to learn it right now is Clay has a university. It's called Clay University, and it is an incredible resource for learning how to use Clay. So you have an intro to the tool. There are a ton of different courses on how to use Clay. So for inbound, outbound, research, CRM enrichment, I mean, the possibilities are pretty endless with the amount they can teach you here. So like there's a ton of information. They did a great job and they're working on it even more. I would probably just use this because it's free.
Cool. Question from Hector. How can Clay help me get a response from target investors for client companies seeking investment to fund their growth?
Could you say that one more time? I didn't hear the first part of it.
Yeah, how can Clay help me get a response from target investors for client companies seeking investment to fund their growth?
Yeah, I mean, so the short answer would be to gather a list of potential investors that you'd like to reach out to. Of course, you can use Clay to do this, or you could even just find another resource to find these investors. I'm sure there's directories all over the place with the investors you're potentially looking for. I would then import them into a Clay table, and then from there, write copy that you feel like is an enticing pitch for your product or service. You could, of course, include a pitch deck if you wanted to. Maybe you just want to shoot them with like a quick intro email. I'm not really sure what the approach you'd like to take. You could, of course, do the more direct approach, which is like, here's a pitch deck, let's talk. Or you could do another like kind of nurture sequence that's just like, let's connect, and then kind of like build a relationship from there. So using the same steps that I used in this, probably a little less complex than this would have to be. But like the idea is really just import a list of investors, enrich them for whatever data you need to create like a personalized first line is probably be my best advice. Create a personalized first line using ChatGPT and then sequence that to a tool like SmartLead. I know that was like a lot, and it's just difficult to explain something in like such a short period of time, but the idea would be to use Clay in that sense.
Questions keep coming. Anna, can it find my ICP based on multiple variables?
Yeah, so I can kind of show you how Clay's sourcing works. Clay has this incredible sourcing mechanism. So if you click create new and then table, there are a ton of different places you can find data from. You can find lookalikes of existing companies that you might want to find lookalikes for. You can scrape companies from LinkedIn. You can find companies based on their tech stack. You can find local businesses by scraping Google Maps. But let's just say for your example, your ICP is on LinkedIn. You just click find companies and you can filter by a variety of things: industry, where they're located, company size, keywords in their description. And you can import them all from there. So there's quite a bit you can do. And you can, of course, filter down even further once you start enriching them in Clay and then filtering down based on that original list.
Let's transition to some pre-submitted questions here. Can you share how Clay integrates with existing RevOps tools to streamline workflows?
Yeah. So I guess some of the RevOps tools that pretty much anybody can relate to essentially would be like the CRMs. And so I'll show you a cool idea or a cool like a concept generally as how you connect those. I'm going to hop into my own workspace to do this because I know I have a Salesforce account in here somewhere. All right, I'm going to pull up a random campaign. It doesn't really matter because I can just show you how it all connects. So we have a list of people, a list of companies here. Let's say we want to add them to Salesforce. You just click add enrichment, type in Salesforce. And this goes kind of into another use case of Clay, which is like incredible Salesforce integration. And you can click create record. See, I have my Salesforce account already created. And we can go down to our Salesforce object. In this case, we're having companies. So we can click account. And then you can actually map out every single column from this list into your Salesforce. And so, for example, account name, you just throw in the company name column, which I guess would be this in this case. And you can do this with every data point that you could possibly want. So you can enrich every single Salesforce record you have because you can actually import records from Salesforce as well. If you go down to here, import records from the Salesforce list, you can then import them, enrich them for whatever you want, and then re-upload them. You can clean up data, you can normalize data, you can delete contacts that are outdated and not necessary to you anymore. It's an incredible RevOps tool. And Clay's kind of pushing that idea a lot more heavily now. They started with outbound, but they kind of realize, especially with more mid-market to enterprise companies, RevOps is really where it stays strong. And so our agency's been doing a ton more RevOps work. Clay's been pushing the RevOps idea a lot, and it's incredible for it. Like it keeps your Salesforce just perpetually free of bad data, which is like obviously an incredible value prop.
How do teams balance automation with authenticity in outreach using Clay?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. I think that a lot of people see Clay as a tool to just spam emails with like some small degree of personalization without actually adding any value. And I cannot emphasize enough how important I think it is to find messaging that works on a small scale before using Clay. Like, in my opinion, Clay is far, far better for high scale campaigns only if you have messaging that's already working for like an SDR team, for example. Like if your SDR sending a really authentic, resonant message with your audience, figure out how to replicate that in Clay and then send it at scale. It's really not a way to just be spamming prospects with just like one personalized first line that has no relevance to your value prop or to their company. So I would just emphasize that importance. It's like a lot of people see Clay, especially when they see demos of it on LinkedIn, is like this magic tool as to how you can just like immediately have incredible outbound, but it's really just a way to scale good strategy. So if your strategy sucks, you're scaling a bad thing, it's not going to work still. So definitely worth noting.
Patrick, we can go on and on and on. Sandra, you mentioned that Clay works with Salesforce. Does it also integrate with HubSpot?
Yes, it does. I would argue their HubSpot integration is actually better than their Salesforce one because it's has a create and update function in the same integration, which I think is incredible. But yeah, it's really great. It does the same stuff that it does with Salesforce with HubSpot.
Cool. How does Clay ensure hyper-personalized outreach without losing scalability? You kind of
Without,
show that.
yeah, without losing scalability, I'm not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say Clay's entire function is to scale hyper personalized outbound, and so I feel like that. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like the demo kind of showed that.
Yeah. What's the most creative use of Clay's AI agent you've seen in outreach campaigns?
Oh, that's such a good question. I'm trying to think of some stuff that we've done recently that's been really cool. Man, and like all of my LinkedIn content's around this, and I love how I'm drawing a blank now, but I'll try to think of something really quickly. We had one recently. I actually kind of mentioned this earlier in this talk, but we had one where our client wanted us to scrape the call to action information on a specific button in their website's form. Like essentially they were scraping like HVAC companies where you go get a quote for an HVAC job and like you fill out a form to get that quote. And so we use that call to action information as a personalized first line because like the whole idea is like if you work in an HVAC company and you don't know what clay is, you're just going to assume we did our research there. Like, there's no way you're going to be like, they use an AI agent to go scrape our website and find this call to action verbiage. Like, no, like, so the whole idea was like, let's create a first line that makes it so obvious that we're reaching out to them one to one. And that was cool. But I mean, I would definitely recommend checking out, obviously, like, I think my LinkedIn is a great place for clay content. The clay YouTube is a great place for clay content, but there's like infinite amount of cool use cases you can do. We've done personalized videos, we've done personalized voice messages, we've done personalized images. Yeah, I mean the list goes on, but you can do a ton of crazy stuff with this tool, as you can probably tell.